fortunate enough to get to come back to the training center as a coach. I got a silver world medal for juniors and 2 bronze at the senior level. And now I work with U23 and senior athletes and our residents at the OPTC. So today I'm going to be talking less about X's and O's, but if you have X's and O's questions, definitely ask. But I'm going to be talking about the purpose of some drills, and I'll tell you about a little thing that was a game changer for me as a coach. I was at the high school level with boys and girls for about 9 years before I ended up back out here, and we were working on back pressure on top, right? Folk style. I'm not going to talk about folk style after this at all, but this is to get me kick-started. But we talked about back pressure, and we did all the drills, and we talked through the things, and I used all of the words, and we watched the video, and as a group we were still struggling, and I was like, man, I've used like all of my things, like I don't know what else to do. And so I was like, okay, let me think about this differently. Can I create a scenario where the only way you can be successful is to figure out the thing, and then they have to figure it out? And so instead of, we used to do stand up, return, knee slide, stand up, escape. And instead of starting that way, I had it changed where the bottom person was set and top person was behind them and would come and then make contact, like moving contact. And that's when the person had to do stand up, right? And so if they didn't understand the back pressure, then they ended up on their face. And so that was the incentive to figure out where the back pressure went. And then this person's like having to aim, right? Like if you're bottom and then the drill doesn't start until I hit, then they start figuring out back pressure. And that was like a mental game changer for me when I would get frustrated when I used all of the like tools to like learn a thing, but they're still trying to figure out the thing, right? And so I have some drills where we're talking about not beginners, but some of the kids that are getting to that transition to the next level, whether that's JV to varsity, or high school to college, or college to afterward, or even I would say our age groups, or like our 5, 6, 7, the difference between them, and then our very top women. And 3 areas that I see a lot of would be hand fighting, and being able to pressure and take ground, slash heavy hands, and then like take down a turn transition are kind of 3 areas that separate levels. And they can be kind of hard because like you can go, like I started, the idea was I was going to be doing hand fighting, and I could have talked through all the hand fighting things, but I'm going to assume that you guys know the hand fighting things, right? When they have a 2-on-1, you can attack this hand or that hand or the elbow, right? All of those, the X's and O's. But how do you help kids who kind of have been exposed to the X's and O's take it to the next level? So we're going to talk a little bit about drills that help to do that. So I have volunteers that, if I could have both of you guys do this one, where one, you're going to be in charge the first time, and then you're going to be trying to stay in good position all the time. And then your job is to push, pull, circle, snap, change speeds, or change directions until I say stop. Ready, set, go. Now you got to use ties. Good, break. And then we start talking about like, if you can count to 3, or if I can count to 3, you've done a thing for too long. So and a lot of times after we've gone through some of these drills, when we go to live, and all I have to do is be like 1, 2, 3, and then that person's like, oh yeah, I'm hanging, right? I gotta change. I've gotta be able to do, if I'm pushing, I gotta pull. If I'm pulling, I gotta circle. If I'm in here, I've gotta change directions, or one of those things, push, pull, circle, snap, change speed, change directions, or change levels, okay? Then we've got the kid who, if it's more than 10 seconds, they start feeling super itchy, right? And they just gotta shoot, right? It's been 10 whole seconds. I've done like 2 whole setups, right? And so we gotta help that person deal with feeling itchy and to continue to hand fight longer. So sometimes I'll do like a 10-second. You're gonna set up, I don't know what your number one leg attack is. You're gonna do your number one leg attack, but you have to hand fight until I get to 1. All right, here we go. Ready? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And you get that takedown, right? And there was at least one that was there before that, right? And you really wanted to take it and you felt that, but then being able to like live in that discomfort of to stick with it, right? Because a lot of times they get frustrated, they're like, they do the one setup, or even if they do the 1-2 setup and that kid can hang, then they're like, oh, my setups don't work. Well, that's not true. You just have to be able to continue doing those. And so the 10-second countdown is good for the itchy wrestler that feels like they have to shoot all the time. And sometimes we can do like 20 to 30 seconds. 20, to be honest, is like real, right? If you're gonna get to the higher levels, that's how long, let me take a step back. If you watch some of our top wrestlers drill, and sometimes it can feel like they're not doing enough of them because it's 20 seconds of setup. 100 things are happening before the actual takedown happens, right? They're doing a ton of work. They're just not doing like 50 reps. They're doing, 25 reps with 20 seconds of setup first, right? And it takes a while to get comfortable doing that. So sometimes we'll do the same kind of concept, and then it'll be your turn first, and then your turn first, and then sometimes we'll do like 20 seconds, or sometimes I won't even tell them. You have to keep going until I say go, and then you can pull that trigger. And then another drill is both of you, it's gonna be live hand fight until I say go. Whoever's winning the hand fight will have a takedown. Okay, so like obviously not super duper live, but like we're going like, but both of you guys are trying to do your hand fighting, some ties, some angles, but you can't pull the trigger. One of you is gonna have to decide. Ready, set, go. And go. Good. And then this one we'll do like a bunch of times because sometimes they're both pulling that trigger at the same time, and then they're learning instead of just the hand fight that like you're gonna make this happen, right? When it's time to go. And then hopefully at some point, some of your ones that are ready to take it to the next level start understanding that like, oh, okay, if I'm winning the hand fight when she says go, I'm the one that gets the takedown, and then there's no resistance to the takedown after that. And sometimes if you get that kid that accidentally gets the single leg, you're like, sweet, yeah, I'm not mad about that. Okay, so I definitely encourage putting a timer on it, and I definitely encourage sometimes the fact that they don't know when it's gonna come, and sometimes helping them feel all 10 seconds of it and be okay with it because the end is coming now. And they get to take it, but to feel like that they can do that forever. And if you're like, well, if I can do this for 6 minutes, then my takedowns will be there. And sometimes you have that kid who can get in on a leg on anyone, right? And then the finish gets to be a trouble. Well, if they have been working so hard to get in and their whole brain is committed to getting in, but they haven't realized yet that they're not ready for the next step, which is the finish. Now you gotta take their brain off of that part. You're like, all right, your job is to create angles, it's to create pressure, it's to do setups, and then just trust that the takedown's gonna be there, right? You have to help them switch their brain from only focusing on the getting to it, and then they get stuck or they're surprised that they're in, right? And then they usually don't, some of them don't realize it until maybe you even have to tell them, okay, you don't have to concentrate on that anymore. You're ready, you get in on anybody. Now let's get to the second, let's get to the finishes. So take your brain off of the beginning part and trust that those things are going to be there. A side next to the itchy kid, which a lot of times is our lighter weights, our upper weights sometimes, we'll be hand fighting, and I'm expecting to go get my underhook, and then I'm going to move them and circle them and get those feet moving. Like my whole job is to get the feet moving. And then if this person's got sticky feet, and I'm not moving, or they keep this leg, right, and I'm trying to go, and I'm like, the stuff's not there, and I start getting itchy, like my stuff's not working all of a sudden, and I might start panicking that I can't hand fight anymore. Well, it's not true, and a lot of times the thing that can help the person who's dealing with sticky feet is to drive back in, okay? So I talked about push, pull, circle, snap, change of levels, and change of speed. So if I'm in here and I'm not getting this thing to step where I want to go, a lot of times just redirecting straight in is a good reset button. And then we go, and then maybe there, I got it, right? And a lot of times being able to put whatever thing I'm doing and then go straight in as like a reset button. The same thing if I'm going to be like going up and down, snap, and then get that drive in as like a reset button. So there's usually two scenarios when people start getting frustrated with hand fights. One is the itchy kid that has to shoot if it's been more than one setup for 2 seconds, right? So the countdown helps that kid. And then some of the bigger girls, or the upper body people, it's when they try to do a thing and then they don't move how they want it to move, or they just do this number, right? When they're facing that wrestler and this person's getting frustrated. I usually try to get that reset, drive in, and then change directions. And sometimes we start talking about stringing some things together, because you can't defend all of the things at the same time. And then realizing that if what I'm trying to do is make this footstep here, and I miss that one or something, I can always come back to a snap and push and go, and then when in doubt, I'm still working my angles and I'm still getting him backed up, and I'm still showing the ref that I'm in the underhook, which is the controlling tie, which means they should be the one on the clock, right? So like, when in doubt, go back to hand fight. If your setup didn't do the thing that you wanted to do, hand fight and take up space. Are the notes on that one. Okay. Another thing, like a little contest that I'll about use both of you guys for is, your job is to put your face here or here as many times as possible, and then you win if you can get below here and double, like 2 hands on a knee. Okay, ready, set, go. Good, freeze or break. All right, so then, so now if you'll notice, he's trying to get some space because he's trying to get under there, right? And your head, hands, and arms are all ready for that. Every time that he takes up that space to go away, that's when I want you to put your head literally right here. Try to put it on his collarbone. Okay, go. Yeah. Break. Good. And then I want you, don't listen. I want you to like, you're gonna trick him, right? And I want him to start feeling like he's winning, but I want him to get a little bit frustrated, and then all of a sudden you're just gonna drop and get him. Like, even if it's very, very on the edge, okay? Okay, same drill. Ready, set, go. Good, break. Good. So like when you start, sometimes I'll give each person a really specific task. And then also it's really important to do it in a little bit at a time, because if you do the very hardest thing and they're like, it can be super frustrating, because after a while we're like making it more and more stacked against him, right? Or making it more and more stacked against them, so that they're working really specific things. So you want to like do it gradually before you get there. And then we can start talking about, like, especially if you've got a controlled tie wrestler. I don't think that's what you are. You seem to be a space wrestler based on your motions so far and shots and stuff. But if that's what you were, then I'm like, all right, and this guy's not giving you the motion you want. All you need to do is that drill, get him to the edge. Now he's got to give you those motions, right? So if you've got a person who really needs that motion from the other person and they're getting frustrated with that person, now you're like, okay, we're going to do the taking space drill. We're going to do the collarbone drill, and your whole job is just to get there if it takes like 30 seconds. And you can even sometimes time them so that their focus can change. Like their focus in the beginning is takedown, get my setups, move their feet how I want their feet to be moving their upper body how I want them to move. for the purpose of my takedown. And then sometimes you can switch them out of that. It's like, okay, he's not giving you what you want. She's not giving you the motions that help you. So now your job is to just take space, cover ground so you can get them over here, and then start doing all of your regular stuff, right? But to help them also just feel sometimes what 30 seconds is like, right? Sometimes it's like, if it's gonna be more like, we need to take down a minute, not a takedown every 20 seconds, which is what's gonna be, you know, when you first start making varsity high school, it's 20 seconds. If something hasn't happened, then let's all panic, right? But to start feeling like, okay, yeah, I can do this for 30 seconds, and then trust that my takedowns are gonna be there. All right, so that's a drill for taking space. And taking space is a big time game changer at the very top level. I mean, if you ever watch, like Sarah Hildebrand is an expert at it. Like, she is all the time, like, taking space, right, and getting everybody to the edge. She's very good at that. If you need an example, go Google her, get some YouTube videos of her. And then let's talk about heavy hands, angles. Here's the contest for this. If you can get, we're gonna start in quad pod or bear crawl. You have to stay in quad pod or bear crawl. And if you can get his head and elbow, his head or an elbow on the ground, you win, okay? If you can keep him from doing that, you win. That's it for now, okay? Yeah, both of you guys are. You guys can't get any higher than that. Okay, ready, set, go.
Head or elbow, you said, right?
Yeah, head or elbow. Good, great. Whew. And sometimes it really, even as a coach, you start getting itchy yourself to like start telling them stuff to do, but he actually figured it out, right? Like, sometimes let them figure it out, because honestly, I don't get to use his body. He's the one that has to use his body. So sometimes when you're itchy as a coach, stop it. Just let him figure it out, and then we can talk through it at the end, okay? All right, so now, same drill, but we're on our feet, and then you win by not letting things happen. You win if you can get two hands, an elbow, or a head on the mat. Go. Good, great. 2 hands. Yeah, and then a lot of them, like, they'll start figuring out, like, oh, it's gotta be 2, so like, I'm still doing horrible things, but I got 1 hand, you know? And you can start changing it. Okay, so next, and you guys, like, I'll have to take it down a notch for this one. But now you win if you can get his body off the ground. So, for example, if you had a single and you lifted, or a double or a lift, right? Or any way that you can get a hold of him and pick him up and put him down, you win. Same rules for you now. It's 2 hands, an elbow, or a head on the ground, and you win. Yeah, if he gets you off the ground, so you could reverse lock, you could front headlock and pick him up.
Right.
And you got that elbow, right? And then you can flip it, right? And now people are starting to think differently about all of the positions. And then you can add things like out of bounds, right? So if you lift him or if you get him out of bounds, you get a point. I've had another one. If you can get behind, and how do you can decide what behind means, like double unders. Does that mean a lock? Does that mean just past these arms or whatever? And sometimes for the pressure, it's good to keep the same guy. It's 2 hands, a head, or an elbow. And then this one keeps adding things. You can lift them. If you have to get my hands, but if I can get my hands like this, like locked like that, then you get a point, right? And then sometimes you can add, 5 push-ups for the loser or whatever. Or you can start adding them. So you have 4 opportunities to score by either getting 2 hands, a lift, a push out, or all the way behind, and each one is 5 push-ups at the end. And then every time you get 2 hands, an elbow, or a head. So like it can be a snap and they're back, you have to wait till they get back up and then you do it again, and that's 10, and right? And you can start adding and making it that kind of contest. So that one's a good one for understanding that pressure, and then also being able to slowly add things, because if they can do awesome pressure and then just open their legs up, then that's no good either, right? So we have to start adding layers of protection. Another area to help people think differently about their wrestling is to ask them to think mechanically, okay? So I'm not gonna do this move to that move to this setup to this finish. Right now, all I'm gonna do, you're gonna be quad pod, and then I'm gonna grab a leg. And now I'm thinking mechanically. So what happens if I push him this way? What happens to me? Okay, well, if I do it like this, my chest just went down, but weight went on his hands. What happens if I do this? Okay, what if I drive forward, but I push my hips like this? What happens to him? What happens to me, right? And then having them like work through in their own brains, okay, if I just make that happen, then I get the takedown, right? And then we call it a thing like backside single, you know? But understanding the mechanics of it. And then we can do like, all right, you're back to quad pod. I'm gonna have your leg, and then I'm gonna have it nice and secure, and now your job is to be the boss of me. You just move me around, right? Is that go? Right? No, that's great. No, it's perfect. Because one, he has to start thinking of the different ways. Whether he changes direction, or maybe he pushes back into me. Then I have to start thinking about a couple of things. One, securing the foot. Two, staying with him. And then I can start understanding things like balance. Like, it's really hard to talk to somebody about balance, but if now he's gonna do it the second time, now I'm gonna have my balance a little bit, right? And you can use lots and lots of words about keeping your hips under you, right? We all know structurally we're supposed to have our ankles and our knees and our hips and our shoulders all in a row right here, right? But understanding the difference between having my own weight and then that helps you kind of really understand mechanically where your balance, why we do those drills, why we do stance of motion like that, why we do squats or cleans. And then you can flip it where now it's my turn. I'm the boss of him. Right, different ways that I can make things happen to the other person's body, and the things I have to be able to do to make that happen. Especially when it comes to like, hey, did you see that? When you had it great until your shoulders started getting away from your knees, and then you lost it. And now you're able to talk about your hips on your knees and that kind of thing. So that's thinking mechanically. Let me get a sip. Does anyone have any like questions or anything to talk about? Yeah.
So I noticed kind of the theme of the drilling is just understanding positions, pressure position, motion. And at one point you talked about not assigning any specific techniques to anything, just allowing people to simply wrestle and move with wrestling movements.
Yeah.
With regard to the USA Wrestling, the curriculum, where do these types of drills come in?
So this is, when we do the hand fight drill, I'm gonna assume that he knows how to get an underhook or a 2-on-1 or a collar tie, and that he knows how to fight out of it. But now I put a clock on it, or now I put, both people are going live. So this is like after you've done the single legs. This is also starting to know if I'm like, hey, what's your number one move to that side? He's able to answer that, right? This is after, I don't know if Terry talked about it in his session where understanding both sides of the bottom of the body and top bottom, you guys remember that? So your athletes need to be able to answer those kinds of things. If I have my underhook on this side, what does that mean? Well, for me, I'm looking for front headlock or single leg, right? If I have a underhook on this side, what am I looking for? If I really want a high C, do I want to even be in an underhook, right? What's my move on this side? What's my move on this side? What's my move up top and what's my move on bottom? These drills happen kind of after that.
So it's
Yeah, definitely. They should at least have some of the basics. And you can start introducing some of these games for fun before we've learned how to do that. And sometimes they'll like, a kid who's never done an underhook before, but you're like, go pick him up. They get an underhook and you're like, hey, that's called an underhook, you know? So like, I guess you can flip it and think of it that way. Or if it's like the push out drill, like whoever gets the other person out, and then you're like, hey, you grabbed his leg, that's called a single, right? You know, that kind of thing. But a lot of times this is for helping them get to that next level when either they can get to that leg, but then what? Or they start taking sloppy shots even though they've got great shots. But if anybody can hang with a hand tie, that's when you use that. Or the person who's actually great upper body, and then if the kid can hang for 2 seconds, then they start getting frustrated, right? That's when they pull that one in. Let's see. Okay, so I'll finish with this one, and then if anyone has anything that they want me to actually just show, like the X's and O's of, we'll talk about that too. This one is a great one for girls, okay? This one's a great drill for girls specifically. And obviously anytime you make a generalization, it's not gonna fit for everyone. But very generally, a girl brain communicates. Why do women talk all the time? Well, it's because we're always trying to build bridges and we're thinking relationally with the other people, and that takes talking. Also, literally, they've done studies on female and male brains. In female brains, if I have a problem I'm trying to figure out a particular finish for my single leg, and I'm trying to work it through my brain, I'm actually, as a woman, more likely to get to the answer quicker if I can actually talk it out with you, right? Instead of just thinking the words in my own brain and picturing the own things, I can be like, well, I'm trying to do this, and I'm doing this, and that doesn't, and then you can say something, then back and forth helps us get there quicker, okay? And so, how can we utilize one thing? I encourage you to let your girls talk at the beginning, and maybe even on purpose, give them a thing to talk about in the beginning, and like let the talking and the connecting happen before practice happens, and then get started on practice. Because sometimes it's like we just got to do that part, and if we have to do it in the middle, we'll do it in the middle. But if you let us do it in the beginning, maybe we can do it in the beginning. But also, if you can, like, it can also go really wrong, right? All of a sudden, they've done nothing but talk for an hour, right? So we got to be able to channel it and help them channel it. Like the boys, they're ready to like fight and punch, right? And we can utilize that energy, and if we point it in the right way, we get takedowns for it, right? So same thing with females. So we get a group of 3, put them in groups of 3, and then we're gonna work, do you guys both know a little bit of freestyle? Okay, so you're gonna drill takedown to turns. We'll just do like 3 in a row. Yeah, maybe 3 actually. Okay, great. So, how did that feel? Okay. And what did
I feel like I
you?
could have more motion.
What was that?
I feel like I could have had better motion, better pull here.
Okay, yeah, perfect. Okay, how did that feel to you?
Different. I'm not used to freestyle, so.
Okay, all right.
Definitely different for the role.
What do you think, what did you feel that helped, that like got it?
If they got me down,
Yeah,
just as soon as you grab both legs.
okay, once
I
you got
knew
that,
Once I had both legs, had the legs, I knew I was done.
perfect, okay. So sometimes you can help girls talk through like, one, how it felt to them, and then a lot of times they'll get a lot of great input from their partner. They're like, well, when you do that, like, I would just stop it, right? Or it's like, oh, when you do that, holy crap, it's really great, right? And now they reinforced each other, and they know from somebody else, not in their own brain, that it actually feels good. Or sometimes, especially girls, they'll be like, that was garbage, and you're like, what? That was the best thing I ever saw. And they're like, I didn't have any pressure at all. And then they're like, I felt like my ankles were gonna break, right? So sometimes they need to hear from the other person how it felt. They only know how they felt, right? So sometimes getting that together. All right, so now the drill is take down the turn, and then I'm gonna say freeze, and you have to try to both freeze. All right. And freeze. All right, so now we can talk through a little bit of like what's even there. So what do you think, name 2 different turns that you could go from if you're going from this position?
trying to go Turk, or I'm trying to wait to go trap onto the other side.
Right, because you have this one deep, right, and then, or if you were gonna Turk, what's the next step that you would do?
I mean, I go for it.
Elevate, right. Anything that you're feeling, is there any other move that's there that you feel?
I could grab his leg.
Okay, yeah, so you would wanna make sure you're tucking that one guy, right, perfect, so break. So sometimes you can freeze and then have them talk through a scenario. And you can think of it in two different ways. One could be like, he's talking through it and that what he was actually trying to do was a lace, and that didn't happen at all, right? So like, if you really wanted a lace, how would you do that slightly different?
Come down off the hip.
Right, yeah, get that down pressure to make them fall over a little bit. You could also like change that direction to the backside even more. So you can talk about like how I would do it different to make the thing that I want to happen, because sometimes it doesn't happen that way, right? And then sometimes you can also kind of just freeze. So the third thing that I talked about, we talked about hand fighting, taking space and pressure / heavy hands. And then we talked about takedown to turn, that transition, instead of it being a takedown and a turn, but being able to go and understand that you have to have a bite of something on the way. We can kind of talk through what's there. Terry talks about like know where you're going, right? It's great if you have an underhook, but if you don't know where you're going after that, then what good's an underhook? So same thing with our takedown to turn. I encourage you to ask your wrestlers, what's your number one takedown? What's your number one leg attack? Backside single. So then what's probably gonna be there for turns a lot? Yeah, lace is gonna be there a lot. But here's the thing. The next time you drill, I want you to do 2 in a row where you're gonna go sweep, lace. But I want you to notice how he falls when you get the single. Like, so notice, like, mechanically, what's happening with his hands, his upper body versus lower, and then his feet on how you do it. If I do a sweep, they might fall down different than if you do a sweep. Does that make sense? And that's gonna change how we talk about our lace. So do 2 sweep to lace, and then be able to talk about how he falls when you do your sweep. Okay. What's it?
I told her to roll with them.
There are, yeah. So what did you notice? How does the person usually fall when you get your single?
Normally they try to turn and kick away from me.
Yeah, good. Did you notice anything to add to that? Yeah. So when we're talking about your single, we're not worried too much about the down pressure, because they're already falling away, because that's how you get your single. You're getting that backward pressure. We might start talking more about getting those knees together. The first time, because you did that pull across, his knees were already together, so we don't have to spend all of our time getting the knees together. You see what I'm talking about? So depending on how a person falls, will you go flat? Depending on how a person falls, their pressure you might need to spend a lot of time being able to understand how to drive like this, and not just driving straight down, right? But being able to drive like this, because a lot of times when we fall, they're landing on their, man, every time I get my single, they land on their knees. And I really want to sweep, I really want to not do a gut, because I would say do the gut, right, if they're on their knees. But what I really want is a lace. So then we need to be talking about driving forward, right? And for him, he's getting that good forward pressure and they're going away. And so now it's about getting those knees together. So sometimes being able to talk about what you catch on the way down, or for me, I always got go behinds, right? So then I needed to know which side, if I'm doing a gut, is my deep arm, right? And that's the one that right before we land, I'm getting a little bit deeper, right? And being able to talk that way, because when I get my go behind, I'm generally not getting them back like this. I'm generally getting them driven like this, because I did lots of driving, for example. And I would be able to talk about how my front headlocks finish. It's with lots of pressure, right? And so then I'm gonna be talking about my deep waist or my gut. So being able, one, to like, sometimes, hey, all I want you to do, we're gonna start transitioning to parterre next. Let's do takedown to turn. And now for the next 5 minutes, you're gonna do your top 2 takedowns. And all I want you to do is notice how they land. Like, how are their hands versus their body? Do they land on their knees? Do they land on their hip? Do they land with, do you always have that leg tabletopped before you even land? Is it really hard to tabletop? Like those kinds of things. Notice how they land, and now we can start talking about our turns based on how they land and what they already have and what I need to make sure I'm scooping up, right? If I really want that lace, I really need to make sure I've got that tabletop. So now I'm not thinking about my setups anymore. Remember we were talking about that kid that can get on a leg on anyone, and then they're surprised that they get on a leg? All right, forget about that. We're gonna guess that you're gonna get on a leg on anybody. You can do it. Your whole job, this whole next 5 minutes, is to get to the tabletop as fast as possible, right? And then sometimes the things will start clicking into place because we've figured out what works for their body or another person's body or what they're actually good at. Or I've taught them the way I get a gut, except that when they do a go behind, they're up and I'm ready to leg ride because that's how they're super fast and they're getting around super fast. That was not me. I was all pressure, pressure, pressure. And if they've only heard me talk about a gut that needs a lot of pressure, they're gonna be super frustrated. Does that make sense too? So like being able to kind of like intelligently talk about how mine moves when I do them. So that's generally the things that I do when it comes to those kinds of things. Do we have anything you want to talk about more or other ways to do it? Or
I just want to re-emphasize what Katie said. It was really interesting, again, from the inside going into camp in a specific region. And the way that, we run our camps, I think purpose is more of getting our athletes to interact and teach each other. And so when we had camp, a lot of the athletes, and it was a girls' camp, said, we're just used to going hard all the time. And I think that there's definitely a time and a place, but if you want to encourage critical thinking, it was really good. I felt instead of teaching a ton of things in the camp, we picked 2 or 3 really big focus areas, but we also gave them time to talk and to freeze and to ask and to show. And I think that doesn't have to be all the time, but especially practices where maybe it's supposed to be lower intensity or lower volume, or it's an easy day, it could be a good way for your athletes to interact, I think boys or girls. And Katie, I don't know if you want to talk about the drill that you did with Parterre, where there's 3 people in the group.
yeah, we talked about that one.
Yeah, so that drill that Katie did, right? You get a 3-person group, 3 or 4, and what was really cool is it was more of a spar, maybe even a live, and so like the athletes get to step in and say freeze, and right, I think that a lot of teaching came from that because you've got maybe, different levels of athletes saying, okay, what would you do from here? And they may be more beginner, knowing their favorite turn. And then the other athletes were like, you can do this, and you can do this, and so try this, and things they didn't see. So I think that's really important just for younger athletes, is to challenge them for some critical thinking instead of us always teaching the things. And I think that girls do like to talk, so give them those spaces to interact with each other, and again manage that, because there is a time and a place where we say, hey, let's get back in, let's refocus. But I do think that's a really good space. The biggest, I think feedback from those camps is, wow, I got to interact with another athlete and learn from them, and learn about them. They have the same goals as me, and we're teaching each other technique. And I think, instead of, they're like, wow, my expectation for this camp was all live. Great, we learned things from that. But I think retention that came out of there was, way higher than it would have been because of that. So plan those in for your.
And then you gotta get creative sometimes about the groups, right? If you get 3 quiet ones, or the ones that like don't talk, it's not gonna work, right? So you gotta get the one that can get the other one to talk, right? The responsible one who make sure everybody has all the right stuff on the day and knows what time you're supposed to be at, but doesn't ever talk. Put that person with the one that always loses her crap, but she can get this one to talk, right? Like you gotta sometimes get creative about the groups. And then I would go as far as to say, if you're doing your girls a disservice if you don't get them thinking about learning about themselves. And then being able to answer things like, what is my best thing? What do I do really well? Sometimes they know the answer, but then being able to say it out loud with some confidence is the hard part. That if they one, they need to know themselves, and two, they need to be able to express it. If you have a girl who knows everything, but they can't find their own voice, you've missed a really important opportunity, right? So I very much encourage you to help them talk through the things and get to know themselves, and then be able to say the things, right? Even if it's only to you, or only to that one person that they will talk to, right? But they should have a voice, they should know what that voice is, and by the time they leave you, hopefully you've helped them be able to use that voice, right? Because they're gonna need it out in the, outside of the safety of the wrestling room, right? So, any other questions about anything? Did I use my time?
You talked about, and some of the other coaches talked about kind of core competencies too in hand fighting, and you mentioned earlier a little bit of footwork. We find some kids like focus on hand fighting but get stuck in the mud. Do you guys specifically focus on footwork, and do you do footwork drills, and are there strategies that you're really working on and moving your feet and getting your feet in correct position?
Yeah, so I mean, we do things like ladder drills, and then we honestly would be like, oh man, it's been a while since we've done ladder drills. We better make sure that Tuesdays and Thursdays are ladder drill warm-ups, right? Those kinds of things. So we definitely think about the foot motion, being able to move your feet, and agility things usually during warm-ups. A lot of times when it comes to footwork, like then there's games like the toe tap game or like the tag game, or but then a lot of times I talk about it more like when we do the drill where I've told him, hey, your job is to put your head on the collarbone, and then we've done that maybe 3 times, and now I'm like, okay, glue your elbows to your ribs. Now you have to use your feet to do it, right? And then talking about your feet to go through that. Or if we're talking about, oh, I forgot one of the drills. It's like a hip battle. So if we're talking about like a 2-on-1 or an underhook, now, one, your job is to make sure that you can keep both your arms like this, and you're always pulling. Even if I'm pulling your arm, like, here, give me your arm. Even if I'm pulling, but you should be pulling that arm like that, right? Even if I've got it extended, right? So then we're gonna hip battle, okay? So then I can start talking about, all right, if I'm going hip to hip, I'm going up, right? And being able to push him around. Now your job is to step in front and push me around with your hip to hip, and trying to get hip to hip. So like we work on our feet by where I'm trying to put my hips. And then like having a hip battle, honestly, every single 170 or above girl, 155 and above girl should be able to hip battle. Like they're gonna have to be able to hip battle. Definitely have them hip battle. So now we're just gonna fight our hips right now. I'm just trying to be the boss of you with my hip. You be the boss of me with that hip. Right. Front. Right, and then being able to understand doing that with a 2-on-1, or now you have the 2-on-1. And then understanding sometimes if he's really cranking on this, it feels like it's like 80-20 his advantage. But not really. If he's really hanging on, it's 50-50, buddy. I can still be the boss of you with my hip. I say it that way a lot too. Sometimes we'll do in a tie. I'm like, you can't get your takedown. You have to be the boss of them until I get to 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Your whole job is, they've got the 2-on-1, but you be the boss of them. So like, I'm not really talking about feet much, but I'm forcing them to do feet things, right? Or if we're trying to cover ground, and I'm like, we're doing the cover ground drill, or you can do a contest where my whole job is to get my head on this side of their shoulder, and then I have to use my feet, and this one always has to be in front, right? And then sometimes you can try and make them do like always this one in front. And sometimes doing ladder drills too. Actually, you should do this one's one. I'm kind of going all over the place right now, but I've got lots of ideas. So when we're doing our ladder drill and we're going here, do it with a stance. And then we have to go back, but keeping this foot forward, or making them do both sides so that they can understand how to move both directions depending on this leg being forward and not just this, right? We'll do that one too with like a push-out drill, where if we're here and I win if I can get you past that tape, and I'm always keeping this one, and my whole job is to get this kind of motion, that like lunging motion. So I'm using my footwork, but really, the hip is what I'm gonna probably be making them think about a lot, if that makes sense. So, what else you wanna know about?
Let's see a good 5-point throw.
These are just volunteers, we're not paying them, so.
Did they sign a waiver though?
I think we saw the death waiver.
All right, well, those are things that I think about, I challenge you.